Okay, now let's see who's over there. Okay, Marcy's here.
Yeah, Marcy and Claire were there. I just promoted them.
Good. So we have a quorum. Hey, Marcy. You're muted.
Evening, everyone.
Hello, hello. So I did not, I heard from Claire to everyone. Good evening, Claire. Hey, Claire. So I heard from Tim Martell. He's coming. He's gonna be a little bit late. I did not hear from Tom Wilson. I didn't hear from Adam. So we will give them,
I'm not sure Town of Southborough room 3, but let me see who that is.
so you sure you've pulled Claire over?
I tried. I think she has to accept it on her side.
Are you listening, Claire? Okay, I think she's coming. There's Adam. Good. Here's Adam. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Andrew, did you win the award for being the behind the scenes guy since Jason has moved on?
No.
No,
Eric
Eric is
doing it.
the designated Zoom aficionado.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Okay.
I'm neglecting my duties because I have a 3-year-old behind me on the floor. So Andrew's there. Good enough.
Wow,
for me.
you're really diving right in there.
Yes,
Whatever I could do to
he
help.
volunteered, Claire. He wasn't drafted.
Yeah.
It would have been more of a conscription.
All right, it's 7:31, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I know Tim Martell's running. He's going to be a little bit late, but this is really not for his benefit anyway. It's for the benefit of the new members. This is everything in one meeting that we think you. There's Tom. Good. So here we go. And Jim Haggerty's here. So Eric, we're going to pull over Jim Haggerty as soon as we do the minutes. He is going to start off with an introduction to open meeting law for everybody. Okay. In fact, you can pull him over now if you want to, so you can know when we get the minutes done. Okay, I'm calling the advisory committee meeting to order on September 15th, 2021 at 7:32 p.m. I no longer have to read the preamble that we've been reading for a year and a half as far as remote meetings. That's good. So we can get started right away. So we've got one set of minutes to approve from the last meeting on, and I said 7:14, but it's not 8/4. And Claire distributed those, I believe, yesterday.
Yes.
His email.
Yes.
Okay, so for those that have read the minutes, are there any corrections or comments?
This is going to seem self-fulfilling, but section 4, second line, my name has an S instead of a Z, and there's an error there in the next line following motion as well.
Oh, good. Somebody read the minutes.
There you
Okay,
go.
so I got the S instead remove the S, put a Z, and I'm sorry, Eric, what was the second part?
Same error next line.
Okay, gotcha.
After AP is vice chair and.
Okay.
What are the line
My,
numbers, Eric?
Sorry,
Yeah.
Just give me the line numbers.
26 and 27.
apologies, 26 and 27.
All right. Okay,
thank you.
is that it for you, Eric?
Correct, thank you.
Okay, AP,
No edits.
Marcy? You're muted. There you go. No? Okay, Adam,
No edits.
Tom? You're muted. Okay, there you go. Still can't hear you, Tom. So can you just shake your head yes or no whether you have any edits? Okay. I don't have, Claire, guess what? For the first time, I never have many, right? And they're always cosmetic, but I have absolutely no edits. These are a great set of minutes.
Thanks, but
Okay, so
actually,
Eric,
these
your
these
job
were
is to
pretty
make sure
simple.
that Claire gets them posted. So all she's got to do is make those 2 changes as far as your name and then post them. We should have them posted 45 days from the day of the meeting. So we're getting pretty close. So she'll get these posted in the next couple of days. And all you got to do is log on to the town website and see that they're posted. And Mr. Haggerty's on here to listen to me say this. So yes, 45 days. Okay. All right. So good job, Claire. All right. Those are
So
done.
Kathy, I move to approve the minutes as edited.
Okay. Second.
Second.
Okay. So Claire, Eric seconded. Okay. Roll call vote. We still have to do those. So I call on people the way I see them on the screen. Eric,
Aye.
Cook is I, AP,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Tom. So Tom, you've got a problem with your audio. So if you, can you shake your head on, well, that probably will not make Mr. Haggerty happy. I'm just going to put you as an abstention for the moment. We've got enough to vote. So Claire, call the vote 5-0-1. There's 6 people here.
Thank you.
Okay. So Tom, we can try, you may want to go out and come back in and see if that fixes it. Sometimes it does. That's about the only help I can offer. Okay. All righty. Okay. So tonight is a crash course in town finance. So we is mostly Andrew Pfaff, has put together a lovely PowerPoint that is long. So just try to hang in there with us. If you've got questions, feel free to answer them. And please don't leave here going, oh my gosh, I'm never going to get this. You will get it. You're not going to get it all tonight, but you'll start getting it. It'll start coming together as far as how the town financial system works. It just takes a while, but this will at least get you off to a good start, I think, as far as kind of seeing the big picture. We're going to start though first with Mr. Haggerty, our town clerk. Jim is going to give you guys a brief overview of what he thinks you should know as far as the state open meeting law, etc. And FYI, Jim also used to be on advisory years ago, so he is very familiar with the way the advisory committee works and what its purpose is. So Jim, we'll turn it over to you.
Thanks. I hope not to frighten you off from signing up for these committees, but I kind of like to view my role as kind of a lifeguard, trying to keep you guys out of trouble and allow you to do your jobs volunteering for the town in a simple fashion. And some of these rules make no sense in terms of common sense, but it's the world we live in. So let's just talk about the open meeting law. And the 2 big things to throw out here would be, they use terms like deliberation and public bodies. Well, when I think of deliberation, I think of, juries and Perry Mason and stuff like that, right? They use the term deliberation. It really means communication in any form. It can mean talking live. It can mean emails. It can mean communications by email. It can be communications on a blog. All right. So whenever you hear the word deliberation, it just basically means communication. So what's a public body? A key thing is that it's any multi-member group. Basically, that means more than one person. So if you decided to have 2 people research, I don't know, the new communications issue for the public safety building, that's a body. And you'd have to post meetings and notices and all the other stuff you have to do it. It might sound crazy, but that's the way the rule is. So when you talk about a board, it doesn't make a difference whether you call it a commission, a committee, a subcommittee, a working group. Those terms don't mean a thing. It's all the same if it's a body, meaning more than one person to do that. If it's established to serve a public purpose, it's subject to the law. There are groups of parents that get together to advise the schools on various issues at the nearest school. They're not appointed by anybody. They're people that get together themselves and they meet quarterly and visit the schools. They have to post meetings. To me, that's a head scratcher, but it just is the world you live in. So anytime you have more than any one group, you're subject to this. There are a couple of wrinkles on this. I'm not subject to open meeting law, nor any town employees if they're not a member of a group. So sometimes if you want to get something done, the easiest way to do it is to have somebody like me or somebody who's not a member of your group, like Claire, do something on your behalf and communicate with everybody. All right, that way it's not a member of the body doing it. With certain exceptions, all meetings of a public body must be open to the public. There are a few reasons you can do it in executive session, but it's very, very rare. So when we talk about the communications about a public body, we just worked that through. We talked about deliberations a little bit. And you have to be careful when you have a communication amongst a quorum of the committee. Now, your committee has 9 members can be appointed to it. Your quorum is 5. So you could have communications with up to 3 other members. You could send, Kathy could send an email to 3 other members. It'd be perfectly okay. Kathy could then send an email to 2 other members and everything would be okay. But what you can't do is go to 3 members and then share that information, take that and then share that with somebody else. That becomes a serial deliberation. You can't do that. But you can have individual communication with anybody about anything. You can have communications about administrative stuff. There's no problem on that. But the golden rule to avoid all this stuff is that you never want to express your belief or opinion on any matter that is either currently before the committee or could come before the committee to a quorum of the members. If you stay as simple as that, remember that little thing, that's going to take 99% of the stuff out of the way. Never have an email to or any communication to a quorum of the committee that contains your belief or opinion about something that's currently before the committee or could come before the committee. Now, with that in mind, a good move is never send an email out to all the members of the committee directly. If you want to do that, I would suggest that the chair send it out with blind copy everybody. That way nobody can inadvertently reply all, kind of a situation. That makes sense so far? Okay, this applies to emails, it applies to phone calls, it applies to bumping into people at the transfer station, it applies to posts on the blog. So we had a situation a couple of years ago where a member of another committee was resigning and he kind of took a shot across the bow at the purpose of the other committee and posted it on the blog on a Saturday, and several people replied. And they reached out to me and said, well, it's on the blog, it's not really open meeting. I said, actually it is. It's an open meeting law violation, and that's something that happened in Concord. So I just gave a heads up on that. It's an open meeting law violation if, say, Andrew sent an email to everybody on the committee saying, we really need to take a look at this issue of, I don't know, staffing in the fire department and look at the model that's used by, say, Brockton. I'm making all this up, okay? If Andrew sent that, I mean, he said, because that might save us money. And Andrew sent that out to everybody. Even if nobody replied to that, that's still an open meeting law violation. So you really have to be careful. The golden rule, again, just don't send anything to a quorum of the committee that expresses your belief or opinion, and that's going to keep you out of trouble for 99% of the stuff. Anybody have any questions on that so far?
So Jen, let me pose an example. Marcy and I are interested in one department budget. So we decide to meet at Starbucks for a cup of coffee. Can we do that and actually talk substance, talk about that budget, the two of us?
Absolutely. And you could actually meet with a total of up to 4 members of the committee there. And you don't have a quorum issue. You're perfectly okay. And again, the quorum is not based upon the number of people who are physically on the committee at any one time. It's on the number approved by town meeting when the board was created. So your quorum is 5, even though you have only 7 members in place. So you could meet with up to another 3 members, and 4 of you could meet at Starbucks to talk about that. I'm a Dunkin' Donuts guy myself, Kathy. I don't know why anybody would debase themselves and go to Starbucks, but that's just an aside there. But anyway, yeah, absolutely, you can do that. Perfectly okay doing that. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. A couple of things that would apply to your committee in terms of deliberation and other stuff like that. Something always pops up as to whether you can maybe do a site visit or walkthrough. I know that popped up with the public safety building. You can do that, and you can have a quorum of the committee do a walkthrough, but you can't actually talk about stuff while you're doing it, which may sound a little crazy, but you know, when the Conservation Commission walks property, they're not supposed to talk about it. I don't quite understand how that's supposed to work, but that's what the rule is, okay? Something else that pops up a lot is that what if you're going to have a quorum of your committee attend a Board of Selectmen event? Maybe it's not a joint meeting, but a lot of you want to attend that event. If you're going to have a quorum present, then you should post a meeting. I always tell people, post it as a joint, post it you're attending the meeting anyway, just in case somebody speaks. And if 5 of you were in the audience and nobody was speaking, no harm, no foul. And maybe you didn't intend to speak, but maybe something popped up that you wanted to speak up. So you cover yourself by having posted the meeting. it's just a cover, get out of jail kind of a thing. All right. So that's an easy fix for that. Couple of things about, I'm not getting into agendas and posting and stuff like that. Kathy knows all that. When one of you becomes the next chair, I'll be happy to help you through that and work you through that. But a couple of things about quorums, okay? You have to have a quorum present for you to do the meeting, whether it's Zoom or not, or whatever the deal is. If one of you, let's say, so tonight we have we have 6 members present. So you have a quorum. If 2 of you or any number of you were to recuse yourself on a matter, what you're supposed to do is actually turn off the Zoom and totally leave the group. Or if you're in a room, you're supposed to actually physically leave the room. You don't have to state the reason why, but you just have to tell the chair you're recusing yourself and you leave the room. This is different than if you have a conflict of interest. And the state conflict of interest laws really have nothing to do with common sense that, hey, I'm dealing with my neighbor. It really has to do I have a financial interest in the matter, either directly with one of my family members? That's really, or my business. That's how the conflict of interest comes into play. So if you wanted to recuse yourself from a decision because it's a neighbor, friend, whatever the reason is, you should just say that you're recusing yourself and you should leave the room so that nobody can say that, well, you were giving somebody a high sign for the back of the room or whatever. So let's say we had 6 members of the meeting, and for some reason 3 of you decided to recuse yourself on one issue. Your meeting would still continue. You're still perfectly fine in terms of a quorum, and the vote for that would be the majority on that one item 3, 2 to 1, and you're good to go. If it got down to only 2 people present, it would have to be unanimous. If it's a tie, it fails. So that's something that pops up a lot when people ask about recusing. They don't quite get that, and it just makes a lot of sense to leave the room, and it's just cleaner for everybody. If you obviously, if somebody leaves the room, if you only have 5 members now, if somebody would leave, you have to stop the meeting and you go from there. So it's pretty straightforward. Town meeting is an exception to the open meeting law requirements. There's if you're all sitting and you'd want to discuss an issue, and there's often questions, hey, what does advisory think of this? Maybe you haven't taken a vote, or maybe there's an amendment made and you want to take a position, take a vote. You don't post meetings for town meeting. It's one of the stated exceptions to open meeting law. So that's pretty straightforward on it. Anybody have any questions so far? I just try to keep this I've just covered 90% of the ways that people get into trouble. And one of the problems with open meeting laws is that there's no such thing as a big mistake and a little mistake. It's, oh, you violated the open meeting law. And it makes people think that you're smoking cigars in some back room and working bad deals and stuff. And some of these administrative violations, they count like a huge one. It is what it is. So that'll keep you out of trouble. So let me switch gears and talk about a couple of quick things here, just a couple of quick public record things, which can kind of surprise you. Every record made or received by a government entity or employee, and you guys are technically considered employees, even though you're volunteers, all right? All volunteers under the laws are considered employees. Every record that is made or received by an employee is presumed to be a public record, except for a few very specific exceptions. Now, what's a public record? It can be a book, a paper, a map, a photograph, financial statements, all kinds of stuff like that, right? But any email or text that you send or receive in association with advisory, regardless of whether it's on a town-owned email or town on a personal phone, it doesn't make a difference. Somebody could make a public records request for that. Now, somebody could ask for your American Express bill. That doesn't mean they're entitled to it, all right? And if somebody says, I want to see all your texts from last week, what's the basis for it? They can ask for it, but the town shouldn't give it to them, stuff like that. On the other hand, if you have a meeting here, a public meeting, and one person's at one end of the table, somebody's at the other, and you're texting back and forth, maybe the assumption could be that you're texting each other, when in fact you may be texting somebody you're going to pick up some milk on the way home, or who's going to pick up the child or something like that. So just be aware of that in meetings, because sometimes people can misinterpret that people are trying to have a discussion outside whatever. But be aware that even if you're using the town wants you to use the town email so they can reply to public records requests like that. But if you chose to use a personal email or a business email for a town related issue, you would have to provide that if the Secretary of State ordered that. There was a case down in Brockton a couple of years ago. Somebody who was elected to an office down there had used their personal account, and the public records request was made and they refused to do it. And the Secretary of State ordered the account, control the account, turned over to the town clerk until they could work it all out. I don't want to get in that, so you're good to go. But just a quick note about these records and stuff that you take. You're going to take a gazillion notes and all kinds of stuff like that. The fact that you're creating these for your own personal use to help you in your activity, that doesn't make it a public record. You know, your agenda, your calendar, your notes, the notes you make in your margins, all that kind of good stuff. Those are your own public records. Oh, your personal records. They become a public record when you share it with somebody else. Now, I had a situation where I went through the planning board a year or two ago to talk about a kind of a big picture item, and I was working on a review of the town code, and you know, I had a stack of stuff about yay thick. Somebody asked how big is the project? I said, well, I've got to go through, you know, so many thousand pages. It's going to take me a couple of years to get this done. And I kind of said that in a nonchalant way. And somebody made a public records request. They wanted to see my records, and I said, well, these are my work product. I'm not sharing it. They said, no, you brought it to the meeting and you showed it. I'm like, really? You want to see my chicken scratch on, you know, several hundred pages? God bless you. Come, I'll give it to you. So, you know, don't feel trapped by this, but when you share stuff, that's when you can get in a little bit of trouble. You can't use some of the sharing mechanisms you have that you use in private industry, some of the Google Docs and things like that, kind of a living document. You just can't do that here. Those things have to be created in a public forum. Anybody have any questions about public record stuff? Okay. Nobody submitted a resignation, which is a very positive thing here. And I think advisory is a hugely important decision. I've said this before. I was on advisory for 6 years, and I was on with Kathy for a bunch of years. And you know, Kathy and I sometimes strongly disagreed about things. And but when we left the meeting, everyone was friends, and it was great. It was a great environment. And I remember there were only 2 times when I was on advisory that town meeting didn't agree with advisory. They disagree with the selectmen all the time. But there were only 2 votes. One was on a library issue where the library showed up with the badges that said "Save Our Library." It was over like $2,000. It was nothing, right? But you're not going to win that one. And then Dr. Gabron, who was the superintendent of the schools, got up and he did a little Nikita Khrushchev thing. He almost took a shoe off and banged it on the table, and he was terrific, and he did a marvelous job, and he won. So I wish you all the very best. If there's any way I can help you, please, you feel free to give me a call. I'll send you all my cell phone. If you think there's an issue, call me. I'll try to help you work it out of it. We deal with this all the time. And I get a list of questions from all the clerks throughout Massachusetts every day. So we see some pretty bizarre things. And again, I think a lot of my job is to try to help you guys do your job and avoid some of this administrivia. So feel free to give me a call if I can ever help you.
Thank you, Jim.
You're very welcome. Have a great night. Take care.
Bye-bye. All right. Okay, so what we're about to do is quite long. We promised everybody that we were going to try to end our meetings at no later than 10 o'clock. So we're going to try to keep the promise. So we're going to go pretty fast. We're going to send everybody the presentation separately. We've got a place on the town uses Office 365 for email, etc. We've got OneDrive that we've got a OneDrive folder set up for our stuff. So we'll post it there too, and I'll explain to everybody how you log in and see it. So you'll get all this. So don't worry about taking crazy notes. Just, I'd say focus on it. If there's something you want to talk about to expand upon, just raise your hand and we'll do it. But it's long because when you look at the whole thing, there's a lot involved here. So with that introduction, Andrew is going to roll through the PowerPoint, and he and I are going to swap roles as far as leading the discussion. So we've got a plan as far as who's doing what. So you ready, Andrew?
All right, you see that okay?
Mhm.
Yep.
All right. So I'll start with, this is kind of just an overview of Southbro, and just kind of, I mean, some of you are new to town, some of you have been here for a long time. We figured we'd start at the basics, what is Southbro? So this is just some high level demographics about the town. We'll kind of go pretty quick over this. Population of about 10,000, median home value about 600,000, median household income. So pretty good there. Revenues or expenses are usually around the 53 million mark. This is just showing the trends of our revenue and expenditures over the years. So it's on average, Kathy, what would you say, about 3% or 2.5% over the years? So kind of around inflation is where we try to keep it at.
Some years more.
Yep. This is kind of just a breakdown of the different income areas of which we get. Kind of the same trend as the expenses. And again, we'll send this out so people can review it in detail, but I figured we'd just quickly touch on it. This is some population trends. I haven't seen the 2020 census one in here, but I think it's probably like 10,100, I think, of the last town census. So it's pretty close to the estimate we had. So yeah, the town had a big surge in the early, late 90s. And that's when we built the fourth school and did a bunch of work then. So, but you can kind of see that it's starting to plateau a little bit. There's not a whole lot of buildable land left in Southborough, so we're starting to kind of max out here. Same kind of household trends. Breakdown of the population by age. So Southborough on average is a little bit older, but it's pretty good. Not a lot of young people besides those in college usually.
So focus on that last sentence there, because this is important, that we do think the senior population is going to grow a lot in the next few years.
Yep. So this kind of goes to that household income, median income.
So Southborough is considered a very affluent community in the state of Massachusetts, which affects several things. It influences some of the funds we get. We don't get as much as we might otherwise for schools, et cetera. Helps our bond rating, as Andrew Pfaff knows.
Yep. Helps our economic development in terms of being a good place for business and things like that. And then this is just a breakdown of the different areas of town and the land use. Most of Southborough, as you know, is residential. There's some small industrial and commercial areas. And this is the different zoning areas. And majority of the town is single family properties. Majority is owner occupied, only about 11% is renter occupied. This is just a trend of home values and housing costs. I don't have current values, but those would be a pretty good steady incline over the last year or two. So I think this is certainly on its way up. And here's the businesses in town. Largest employers are mostly St. Mark's and the educational services areas. And here's an interesting statistic that 82% of residents in the labor force work outside of Southborough. So most people in Southborough don't work in Southborough. Although with people working from home, I'm not sure if that statistic will change. And so this is a breakdown of fiscal year 19. It's a little bit different now, but basically where our town expenses go. Obviously, schools are always the largest amount, and then usually followed by police, fire, and public works are usually the biggest pieces.
What falls under unclassified? Forgive me for being so naive here, but it's a big chunk.
I'm not sure. It's probably a catch-all for the other town departments, Kathy, like IT and youth and family and things of that nature.
I would think so. But as you can see, the schools drive our budget. So if the schools end up with a big increase, we've got a problem. It's hard to get around a big increase if the schools come in with one.
All right, so now I'm going to turn it over to Kathy to handle this section.
Okay, so I guess one thing that we do want to make sure is clear tonight what our role is, because some people get confused sometimes. So I'm just going to, we got this on the screen, but I'm going to read something because I think it's important to make this clear and not be loosey-goosey about this. The advisory committee is the town finance committee. We're just called the advisory committee. The state recognizes that a lot of finance committees are called advisory, but every town is required to have a finance committee or an advisory committee. So we are state mandated. We are considered a legislative committee as opposed to an executive committee like the Board of Selectmen. So our job is to basically work with town meeting to basically pass the warrant for the year, enact new bylaws, etc. So we're there to basically support the town meeting, advise them as to what we believe they should vote for and against. We're the equivalent of, if you understand the US government, we're the equivalent of the House Ways and Means Committee or the Senate Finance Committee, or probably even more so if you know, there is a thing called the Joint Committee on Taxation that really does the work to basically help the congressional committees do their work. So that's what we're there, is to provide expertise to the town, so that they know that we have vetted everything that they see in front of them to help them make a decision. They have the right to come to us and ask us why we believe what we do. They see the votes that we make. We actually show the vote as far as what we vote on. So we basically recommend for every article that's included in the warrant, which includes a lot more than just the budget, we make a recommendation that we either support it or we don't. Okay, so now this is what I want to read to you. And this is straight from the law that basically enacts our committee. The Board of Selectmen is the executive branch of government. It is their job to collect budget information, develop budget priorities, and formulate a balanced budget, the same as our US president or a governor. Once developed, that budget is presented to the Finance Committee, us, representing the legislative branch, the town meeting. In effect, the local Finance Committee has the same role as the House Ways and Means Committee in the state legislature. It is the Finance Committee's responsibility to receive the budget from the executive branch, either as a collective whole or in parts, have hearings for the department heads and the public can testify, and present a balanced budget to town meeting. That budget should reflect the Finance Committee's decisions based upon their best judgment of the issues and finances of the town. The budget before town meeting is the Finance Committee's, and it is their job to explain, defend it. Let me say that again. The budget before town meeting is the Finance Committee's, and it is their job to explain, defend it. That's where things get a little confused, and I'm going to explain why in a second. This does not preclude department heads or the town administrator from being called upon to answer questions or explain items in more detail, but it is the Finance Committee's budget, our budget. If the Board of Selectmen or town administrator disagree with any item, they can submit a motion to make a change, as is the right of any participant in town meeting. They basically are on the same level as anybody else sitting in the audience at town meeting. At this stage, the Board of Selectmen have an advantage over a governor in that they can participate in the town meeting process. However, they have the disadvantage of not being able to veto what town meeting passes. Okay. In every town having a committee appointed under this authority, that committee shall submit a budget at the annual town meeting. So that's our main role on this committee. We've got other roles too. We've got the ability to investigate anything we want. We've got the ability to recommend other things we want to. So we definitely get into other areas, but our primary responsibility is to basically take the budget, massage it, go over it, make sure we think it's appropriate, make changes to it, make suggestions to it, and then present it to town meeting. Town meeting is now, at least it has been the past couple of years, going to always be the last Saturday in March. So we're going to get started on the budget pretty soon because it takes several months to get all this done. You've got to meet with all the departments. You've got to put everything together. You've got to then compare notes with the Board of Selectmen. So the Board of Selectmen does kind of this in parallel. They look at things too. They listen to what people want, and then we compare notes as to where we are. And we do try to go to town meeting united with one budget, because it would be quite confusing for the Board of Selectmen to have an entirely different notion as to what the budget should be, make motion after motion. So we do try to come to an agreement as to what the budget presented to town meeting should be. And in almost every year I've been on advisory, we've been able to do it. It takes some work at the end. There's always going to be some disagreements, but in the end, that's what we try to achieve. Okay. The other thing, the next thing that I want to talk about is the reserve fund. So the advisory committee has sole purview over the reserve fund. The reserve fund is an amount of money that is put into the budget every year to basically be there to fund emergencies and unexpected things that come up during the year. And there's always a few. It doesn't have a lot of money in it. It's a $50 million budget, and the amount in the reserve fund for fiscal year 22 is $190,000. We wait until the end of the year to officially vote on using reserve fund, but we do ask all the town departments to let us know about anything that comes up during the year as it comes up, so that we've got an idea of what's coming down the road. But we do wait to the end of the year to basically put it all together and decide which reserve fund transfers should be voted on. So that's something that's very important, but we don't do that until July after the end of the year. So reserve fund is solely under our purview, and the amount that's in the reserve fund for fiscal year 22 is $190,000. It's bounced back and forth over the years between 150 and 250, but I can't remember a time where we've actually had a problem with the amount in it. So usually it's enough to take care of things that come up during the year, but it should be things that are truly unexpected or an emergency nature, and that's what the fund's for. Is not to basically take care of someone's budget where they have just made a mistake as far as something they've done. That's not supposed to be the use of the reserve fund. Okay. All right. So Andrew, so that's all I want to say on that slide.
You want to cover some of the stuff here that not the same, right? Okay.
I think I got the big picture. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So now budget process, which is what we're going to get into very soon. We'll start soon. You want to go back to the previous one?
This one?
There you go. Yeah.
Yep.
So Brian Ballantyne, who we're going to introduce in a second. We've got everybody's picture we're about to show as far as who's involved in town government. He basically compiles the budget requests from the individual departments. Individual departments put together their own budget request. They go to Brian. Brian then incorporates them into a large Excel workbook, which we're going to show you in a second. So that's how we keep track of this. And then he shares that with us. And then we start meeting with each of the departments to discuss their budget. We usually have a liaison to at least the significant departments. That liaison's job is to really get behind the budget, meet with the department, understand it, and therefore be able to help explain it. The liaison is not there to advocate for the budget. He or she is there to basically help us understand some of the details that we might not otherwise understand, but in no sense of it are they supposed to advocate for a budget. They're there independently to just try to understand as much as they can and then help bring it back to advisory and help the department explain it when they come in front of us. So those meetings will probably start, they have to start in December. They may start in late November. I'm hoping we can do the capital part earlier because the capital committee should be ready to go before the other departments. So we'll probably do that one first. But that's how the process works. So you'll get to know all the departments. You'll be assigned as a liaison to at least one, possibly two. So it gives you a chance to actually get to know some of the people that work for the town too, which is really helpful. Okay, now the next one. Okay, so here is the advisory bylaw. This is in the town code. This basically is what has been passed and amended over the years that spells out what the advisory committee is supposed to do, how it's supposed to be formed, and all the details. So it's a pretty short bylaw. So this is one thing I would ask you to read between now and the next meeting because this is important for a couple reasons. Number one, you should just know it. But number two, we are going to most likely, assuming this group agrees, propose a couple of fairly minor changes if we have the special town meeting that's currently scheduled for November 1st. If not, we'll wait to the regular town meeting in March. We tried to do this at the last town meeting and we failed. That meeting was going great all the way through. Things were passing so fast. The budget was just going boom, boom, boom. Things we thought people would get hung up on, they did not. Then we got to our article and ran into a buzzsaw. So we learned our lesson. We put too many things and too many changes in one warrant article. So we've now decided that the best way, at least the previous group advisory decided the best way to do this is to break it up. So what the old group decided to do is bring forth what are the two easier changes that we think should be made. And those are officially adding a vice chair here. Right now, it just says chair and secretary. We've had a vice chair for several years. So we just want to get it into the bylaws so that it's there. So that one should be a piece of cake. I can't imagine anyone's going to stand up and oppose that one. The second one is we want to reduce the number of members from 9 to 7. You see, we've got 7 right now. It's very hard to staff a 9-member committee in this town, no matter what the committee is. We've worked with a 7-member committee for a couple years now, and we think it's the right size of committee. It's not too big, it's not too small. We have enough members to do what we need to do, and it's not as unwieldy as a 9-member committee is. I've been on one, and it was a great committee, but it was still too many people. So we're hoping that the town will support this, and I think they will this time. Because again, last time we got hung up on another change, which I'm not going to go over tonight. We'll go over it at a later time when Jason Malinowski comes back in front of us and talks about the changes to the capital planning committee that are being contemplated, because they're all interconnected. So for now, I'm just going to say the two that the previous version of this committee wanted to bring forth again would be changing the committee from 9 to 7 and adding a vice chair. So this is the bylaw that basically says this is what we do. And if you notice, it says that we have got the right to audit anything, to ask for any documents from any town employee we can. So we've got broad authority here to basically investigate anything that we think we should investigate. This bylaw gives us that authority. Okay, so if you go to 913D, says advisory committee shall have authority at any time to investigate the books, accounts, and management of any department of the town, and the books and accounts of all departments and offices of the town shall be open to inspection of the committee and of any person employed by it. So again, we don't make decisions. We are not the executives. We make recommendations, but we've got the right to pretty much look at anything we want to look at. Okay. All right, we are moderator appointed. He appoints 3 committees. He appoints us, the Personnel Board, and the Public Works Planning Board. So that's his purview. The Board of Selectmen appoint a lot of others, but they do not appoint us. We are totally independent from the Board of Selectmen. We work with them, but we don't work in conjunction with them. We do want to work with them on the budget, but the budget is ours to present to town meeting. Okay, Andrew.
So this is just a brief overview of the town. I think Kathy kind of alluded to all the committees appointed by the Board of Selectmen, at least as of this chart being done a couple of years ago. But you can just see kind of all the things that roll up under the Selectmen, town clerk, moderator, the elected boards and commissions. The only one that's missing on here is schools, which kind of are outside of the Selectmen as well. But just kind of gives you a little bit of an overview of the town.
The schools are also elected totally outside Selectmen, totally independent. They do their thing. We compare notes again, but they are very much independent of the Board of Selectmen as far as what they do.
Yep. Here's just a little bit more. Here's the Selectmen and town administrator. This is kind of the roles and responsibilities that they have.
Board of Selectmen is now 5 chairs. By the way, Andrew and I agreed that he was going to be the play-by-play, and I was going to be the color commentator, if that means anything to you guys as far as what we're doing here. So 5 people. We used to have 3 a few years ago. A bylaw was passed to increase the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5, which I think has helped a whole lot. It was an awful lot for 3 people to do. Probably still too much for 5, but 5 is better than 3. They serve for 3-year terms and of course are elected.
Then we have, so this is kind of the areas that are kind of finance related. So you have the Selectmen, which, sign debt and oversee some of the finances. You have town meeting that obviously, does the appropriations, adopts the budget, and is all the ordinances and bylaws. We have us and our roles. We have Paul Sabelli, town assessor, handles all that assessments. We have Brian, who is the treasurer collector.
So now Brian's very important to our work. We will see Brian a whole lot as we go through the budget process.
And then Carla, the town accountant.
Also very important to us.
And then Jim, who we just met.
Yeah.
And so, and then here's the current listing of all the various boards and committees in town. There's certainly a lot of them. You'll see a bunch of them with vacancies. So if you know anybody interested, please have them submit volunteer form like you guys did.
Advisory can only be on one other ad hoc committee, one other temporary committee, which is why Andrew sits on the capital planning committee. Right now, it's ad hoc. We can also be on a committee appointed by the moderator other than ours, which is only two other committees. So we're very limited as to what we can also do. I am also on the committee that is currently considering whether we're going to close a school, which is a subcommittee of the capital planning committee. So I'm the liaison to that one, but that's also ad hoc. So we can be on one temporary committee so far. And then we can be on a permanent committee if it's appointed by the moderator, but there's only two of those besides ours.
How do we know which committees are ad hoc or subcommittees? Is that located on the town website?
I don't know. Do you know, Andrew?
Don't. It should be in the charge. It should be listed on it, but
Most are permanent, I'll tell you that.
yeah, most are permanent. There's not a lot of ad hoc, because if it's an ad hoc for a long period of time, usually it becomes permanent.
So I'm looking, let's see if I can figure out.
So like this one's noise bylaw ad hoc committee. Sometimes they put it in the title.
That helps. So there's no, on the listing on the town, they don't say it with the listing, but if you go into that committee's webpage, it does say whether it's ad hoc or not. So there's no easy way to do it. And, but I can just tell you, the vast majority of these are permanent standing, and there's only a few that are ad hoc.
Okay.
All right, Kathy.
My turn.
I think so.
Okay. Okay. This one's kind of obvious. Property tax is where most of the town revenue comes from. It is the catch-all. So we receive revenue from the state. We receive revenue from local, what we call local revenue, from like excise taxes on the cars is the biggest source of that. Transfer station stickers. So you add those together, you decide what your budget is, you subtract those, then what's left over has to come from property taxes. So go to the next screen. Okay, now this is important. You've probably heard the tax rate. If you take a look at the bills that you've gotten so far from fiscal year 22, those are preliminary. So you're not going to see a tax rate on them. You're just going to see an amount to be paid. And that amount to be paid is based on your taxes last year. All they did was take last year's tax and multiply it times 25% for the bills that were due August 1st and November 1st. Then Paul Sabelli, the assessor, whose picture we showed you, he's about to wrap up his work for the valuation that was done January 1st, 2021. So every year he's got to value all the property in Southpro on January 1st. So he's about to finish that work. And once he does, he'll be able to issue the final tax bills that will then assess the tax for fiscal year 22, subtract what you've already paid, and then divide by 2 for the remaining 2 payments. So on your Q3 bill for fiscal year 22, which is due February 1st, you will see your property valuation as of 1/1/21, and you'll see the tax rate that will be set in a few weeks. When we go to town meeting, we estimate what we think the budget is going to generate as far as a tax rate, but there's still a few things to be determined after the town meeting that affect it. So it's preliminary, but it should be close, but it will be finalized shortly. He'll come to the Board of Selectmen and say, this is it, this is what I did. And then he'll submit it to the state to be certified and checked. So you'll see soon when you get your Q3 bills, what your actual taxes are for the year. And that bill should be more than what the previous two were because taxes go up every year, right? So unless something strange happened to the valuation of property, you should expect Q3 and Q4 to be more than Q1 and Q2. Okay, now, Andrew, can you jump to the historic tax rate slide? Okay, there you go. Okay, so these are our tax rates per $1,000 of assessed value. We're going to talk in a minute about two limits on taxes that are imposed by the state with this law that is commonly known as Proposition 2.5. So our tax rate for fiscal year 2020 was 1666. Our tax rate for fiscal year 2021 actually went down and went to 1621 because valuations went up enough for the properties that we could actually lower the tax rate. And then we're expecting that the tax rate for fiscal year 22 is going to be something around $16.26. So you might say, well, wait a minute. I just went to Wellesley and I saw my friend's tax bill and theirs was like $10 something. So you can't just look at the tax rate. You got to know what the property value is too. You got to multiply the two together to get your taxes. So this is just half the picture. So the values in Southborough are less than Wellesley. So the same house in Wellesley is going to cost more than in Southborough. So you can't tell by just looking at a town's tax rate whether you're going to pay more taxes in that town versus your town. You have to know about the values of the properties too. So there's two parts to that equation to get to your taxes. And this is what confuses people. Okay, so that 1666, which I'm going to get to in a second, can never go beyond $25 as far as Proposition 2.5. That's the most you're supposed to be able to assess, which is basically 2.5% of the value of all the property in the town. Okay. There was a time a few years ago that advisory did a study and we thought we were going to start pushing close to that $25, but I don't think so anymore. Things have, the values have grown enough that we should be fine. If we were to push $25, that means other towns would have gotten there before us. So they would have to change the law. So I'm not worried that we're going to breach that $25 anytime soon. And if we do, the law would have been changed by then because we're kind of in the middle of the pack as far as the tax rate goes when you compare us to the other 350 towns in Massachusetts. Okay. So I'm looking at everybody to see if anybody's got a question on that. So just look at your next tax bill and you'll see what I'm talking about. You should see something like 1626 on there. And then what possibility determined was the value of your property is of 1/121 will be on there too. Okay, so 1/121 is not 1/122, right? And it's not right now. We know how fast prices have been going up lately because of all the changes caused by COVID, but it's 1/121 is what he has to finish up. Okay, now go back, Andrew. Sorry. Okay, so there's four types. Okay, yeah, so stop on the four classes. There's four types of property that get assessed in Southborough: residential, which is a lion's share, 80% or so; commercial, like the building that's shown in the picture; industrial; and then the fourth one is actually personal property. So it's the desk and the phones and the computers, et cetera, in people's offices. Okay, so that's the four sources of tax collections in Southborough. That's the four purposes. When I say that he adds up all the values of properties, so he adds all four of those up and gets a number close to $2.7 billion is what this town is worth right now. And that's considered the assessed value as of each January 1st. Okay. Okay, now we're getting to a part that's really important. And this takes a little bit to get, but once you get it, you'll get it. And it's one of those things, once you learn it, you'll be fine with it. So there's two terms that you need to understand when we talk about Proposition 2.5. One of them is the levy limit, and one of them is the levy ceiling. So the levy is just the real estate taxes we collect. That's the levy on the properties each year. So levy ceiling is what I described a minute ago. That 2.5, Proposition 2.5 says that we cannot assess in Southborough more than 2.5% of the total fair value of the property in this town. There's an exception to that, which I'll get to in a second, but as a general rule, you can't exceed that. We're not even close to it. Our 1666 is, 2/3 of it. So we're fine with that one. We usually don't even have to talk about the levy ceiling. But what we do have to talk about is the other levy, word, and that's levy limit. So levy limit is different. So what I'd like to do now is share my screen. Unless, Andrew, do you have the Excel workbook up anyplace? in
No.
yours? All right, so I'm pulling that one over. So Mr. Martell is here. Hi, Tim.
Hey, good evening.
Okay, so we're in the middle of our primer, Tim, as far as taxes. So can everybody see my Excel workbook? Okay, so this is the Excel workbook that we work with on our budget. So you'll see this a whole lot in the next few months. It's got several tabs. This is the roll up that we're looking at right now, the roll up tab. Let me just make it a little bit bigger. Okay, so the levy limit basically says that you can only increase real estate taxes year over year by a certain amount. So if we added no new buildings, no one expanded their house, no one did anything, we could only increase the taxes from the previous year's levy limit by 2.5%. And notice I said we increased last year's levy limit by 2.5%. It's not last year's taxes that we assessed. We may not have assessed the full levy the previous year, which we don't. We always want to have money left over. It's called levy capacity. And again, the bond rating agencies like that because they know we've got more room to assess taxes than we have to. So we never try to, we always want to leave money on the table as far as the tax levy. So the levy is the most we can do in a year. We hope to not do the most, but you've got to compute it to know that this is what you can't go above. Okay, so can everybody see my cursor? See my cursor bouncing up and down there? Okay,
Yep.
So I'm going to start with fiscal year 2021. Okay, so see where that is. That's the levy limit for fiscal year 2021. So that's going to be our starting point for fiscal year 22, the year that we just passed the budget for. So you see how we start with that same number there? Okay, then the first thing we do the number is we multiply that number times 2.5%, which is what this line is. So we get to increase it by 2.5% because obviously costs go up. We've got inflation, salaries go up. So you get to increase that number by 2.5% per Prop 2.5. And then you get to add into it your estimate of what you think the taxes on the new growth that has occurred year over year is. And that's always an estimate through the time at town meeting. It will be an estimate that we will get from Paul Sabelli, the assessor, to work with. And then very soon, he's going to put the real number in there. So the real number will be more than that. He is very conservative with what he gives us to use. So for example, fiscal year 2021, that was also 450, but it turned out to be 788, almost twice. So this number will go up soon. So our levy limit for fiscal year 22 will actually be slightly more than what you see there. And that will be the starting point for the year that we are going to start focusing on, which is fiscal year 2023. So the town's fiscal year is June 30th every year, just like the state's. So we will use this number adjusted for whatever that changes to when he figures out what new growth is, which he is about to finalize. Okay, now I'm going to scroll to the bottom and show you how much we had left over. So see this number right here, and this number right here, and this number right here. This is what we did not use as far as our levy limit. So we had a pretty healthy amount left over the last 2 years, which is good. We want that. So we had what's called excess levy capacity. So we assessed in fiscal year 2021 about $4 million less than what we could have per Prop 2.5. And that's what we want. So every year we want to make sure we want this number to stay high because we want to have an excess number there. Okay. So that's the first thing you'll see on the spreadsheet is for fiscal year 23 is we will have that computed. Okay. All right. Any questions on that? If you get anything out of tonight, I'm hoping that is understanding what advisory does, what our role is, and then also how the levy limit works as far as our starting point for what we could assess in taxes if we needed to. If we assessed that entire amount, the taxes would go way up too. We'd have a really big increase year over year. So we strive to keep it as a reasonable year over year increase too. You got people here that are on fixed income, on Social Security, their COLA increases for that are based on inflation. So we try to make it look like what people expect as far as their other expenses, as far as increase goes. So last year, fiscal year 22, we are expecting about a 3.19% increase in the average tax bill. So when you get your tax bill, that's what you should see. If you pay $10,000, it should be about $300 more than it was the previous year. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this and go back to.
Kathy, do you want to explain the debt exemption?
Yes, but I want to get back into the primer before I
Okay.
do that.
I'll put it back up.
Okay. All right. Now, remember I said there's exceptions to these two limits, the levy ceiling and levy limit. I'm not going to focus too much on the levy ceiling because we're nowhere near that, but the levy limit, the first big exception is, and this is a temporary exception, you can go beyond the number I just showed you if you have debt and or capital expenses that have been approved by voters, not at town meeting, but on the ballot box when we have our annual election, to basically keep those at what we call outside the levy limit cap. So you can increase your levy limit temporarily by the debt service that has been approved by the town as to be held outside the levy limit. And we typically do that for big things. So now I actually do want to go back to that spreadsheet. So let me get it up one more time. So Eric, you're doing a good job.
Just trying to sit and learn here. Luckily, you're
Okay.
co-host, so.
Okay. Okay, can everybody see my spreadsheet again? Okay, all right, so I focused on this number. Below it is the debt that has been approved by the voters to basically be paid outside the levy limit. So we basically have increased our levy limit temporarily by the debt that the voters at the ballot box approved. So we have to first approve the warrant article that talks about the debt at town meeting by a 2/3 vote. There are very few 2/3 votes at town meeting. This is one of them. So assuming it passes town meeting, then it goes to the ballot box and has to pass by majority vote at the ballot box. If it does, to basically be exempt from the levy limit, you basically compute your levy limit and then add it to it. Okay. Most of this number is from schools as far as the construction and the new public safety building. Those are the biggest sources of debt payments currently. The schools are almost paid, but they're still in there for this year. And then this number is the reimbursement from the state for the school building. So you have to, if you're going to put this outside the levy limit, you got to put the reimbursement outside too. Okay, so that modified the levy limit from what would have been 48 and made it 50. Okay, so our levy limit actually for fiscal year 22 was 50,508,576 because of these temporary increases. And these are temporary because they're going to get paid off at some point. So once they're paid off, you don't add those to the levy limit anymore. Okay, so that's one way to increase your levy limit outside this computation. The second way is to pass an override of the budget, certain items at the ballot box. So let's say that we have a budget that's going to exceed $50 million. And we have to go then to the town, outside town meeting with the town election and ask the town to override this. And if you pass an override, then that's a permanent increase to the levy limit. Okay, so once you override, it's overrid and you add this to it. So you'll keep track of the override from that point on. We have very few override votes in this town. I can remember one that actually failed. The next year it passed. So we don't have many overrides. We've been pretty good about being able to stay within the levy limits over the years. And believe me, we try to, because the people who vote for overrides are not the same people who come to town meetings. So you have no assurance that override is going to pass at the ballot box. So you want to try to avoid overrides unless you just have no choice. Okay. Good enough, Andrew? Okay.
Yep.
All right, so that I think is probably all we want to say as far as levy limits and levy ceilings. But that part's really important to understand this piece of it. And then let me go one step further. So when we end up reviewing a capital expense that we believe should be debt financed, then we've got a choice of recommending that financing be within the levy limit or outside. So that's part of our discussion. So if you keep it in, of course, you are being really conservative and really trying to keep, the effect is you're trying to keep taxes way down. But it's dangerous because you then might start getting close to the levy limit by doing that. So we've got a choice. You don't have to have the debt outside the levy limit. You've got a choice. And the warrant article will specify whether the debt is going to be what we call within the levy cap or outside the levy cap. So it's one thing to keep in mind as far as strategy goes. Small debt stuff we usually keep inside the levy limit, but the big stuff, the schools, the public safety building, any new building, normally we put outside the levy limit because it's a big number. Okay, so it's hard to absorb a new debt number inside the levy limit without running in danger of really using up your excess levy capacity. Okay. All right. So Andrew, I think that's probably enough on that section.
All right, I'm going to put the deck back up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and here's basically what Kathy was talking about, the levy limit, the 2.5%, the new growth, an old override, and then there's your new levy limit.
And new growth is, he values the properties, his assessor values the property on every January 1st, but he can go ahead and include, and he does include, any new construction between January 1st and June 30th. So June 30th of 2021 would be the cutoff per state law. So he's allowed to go ahead and pick up any construction in progress through June. It doesn't have to be done. He can look at it as, how it's built and value that. And he does that. So he tries to get the new growth number as big as possible. So the new growth number is really July 1st of the previous year to June 30th of the next year. So the new growth can extend beyond January 1st as far as the values go.
All right, so this is just kind of a basic overview of the budget process. Here's some frequently used terms that we're going to kind of go over, but you've heard some of them: free cash, local receipts, local aid, chapter 70, chapter 90, levy limit, levy ceiling, stabilization, cherry sheet, revolving funds, enterprise funds, OPEB, which is that's basically pension funds, CPA and CPC, Community Preservation Act, and Community Preservation Commission, which administers those funds. So this is just a basic overview of the budget. Basically, it's the revenue estimates, statement of expenditures, and the timing, purpose of the budget. I won't read it all. And this is an important one: who develops the annual budget? And it depends. So the Board of Selectmen, usually start with the budget or a budget mandate, and Finance and Advisory usually picks it up from there. And also town manager, town administrator, and in the treasurer collector also get involved in different pieces. So each town kind of has a little bit different process. And Kathy, I don't know if you want to add any more.
Yeah, so some towns actually, the advisory committee actually puts together the budget. from beginning to end. Some people actually have hired staff on their advisory finance committees. So you just got to pick the town and look at what they're doing. So there's a lot of permutations and variations as far as what the different finance advisory committees do throughout the state. This advisory committee does not have any paid staff other than our great minute taker, Claire. So Claire is paid, but we have no other paid staff. So we rely on the town treasurer to actually take the first pass at the budget, present it to us, and then we take it from there. We don't have time to try to put the budget together ourselves. So he's in charge of that. He collects the information, sends out the directive to the departments, collects it all, then puts it together in that spreadsheet that we just showed you, that Excel workbook.
It's just a kind of overview of the process. And timeline, as Kathy said, it usually starts late November, early December. Obviously, the last couple of years, town meeting's been pushed off, and so it took a little bit longer. It's not that we wrapped it up early and sat on it. We're doing iterative processes up till town meeting, but hopefully this year we'll be done early because I don't anticipate needing a spring town meeting.
If I had my druthers, it would be later. We used to have it right around April 15th, which was actually not great for me either because of taxes, but this March comes fast. We've only had one town meeting in March so far, and then COVID hit. So both the COVID years got pushed back, and it actually helped us a lot to do our work. So if I had my druthers, we vote to have it in May because you have so much more information. You've got the state budget much more finalized, et cetera. But the reason that the town voted to make it March is because they were trying to help the schedule for parents that had school kids that did sports. And so the sports really didn't start, in earnest until April and May. So it helped get that type of person to town meeting. It's hard to get people to town meeting. We only have a couple hundred people that come on any given year. Every once in a while, if there's something really important, you'll get more, but there's not a lot of people that come. So if you got 10,000 people and you got maybe 300 people, that's what 3% of the town that comes to vote on the budget for the whole town. So we keep trying to find a way to get more and more people there, but it's hard. And of course, COVID certainly hasn't helped, but we had quorums at both of the last two town meetings. They were both outside and done very well considering the circumstances. So we think we'll be back inside in March. At least we thought that until recently. So now I guess it's probably a little bit unsure again as far as where we have the next town meeting. And also the special that's scheduled for November 1st. So anyway, this is how it works as far as what we do. It's an iterative process. We go through several versions of it. We will deal with people a lot of times more than once. We hear from them, then we may have to come back and ask them to make further cuts. So the whole thing takes a few months before we're done.
It's a funny little joke. And so, yeah, so usually there's goals that are set at the beginning of it. Usually we're more financial than anything else, but we do look at different things. This year, a big push was for our Board of Health, especially in relation to COVID. So we did a lot of work on that and expanding the options there and doing different things.
When it's first pulled together, it usually looks pretty bad as far as the year-over-year tax increases. I mean, it can be, 10%, 11%, 12%. So it's always high, and then we start whittling it down. So typically, my Southpro blog gets hold of that, and it scares everybody. We know it's going to come down. We're not going to go to town meeting with a 10% year-over-year increase unless there's something drastically wrong. So that's where we start, and then we start paring it down.
And when we talk about revenue, and we don't really do much with the revenue piece besides just make sure that we keep the finance team honest on what they're estimating from local receipts and that new growth, so that we start from a good basis.
The state aid we get is mostly what we call Chapter 70 money, which is for schools, and Chapter 90 money, which is for roads.
And here's just a listing of this year, what they call the cherry sheets. which is basically what we get from state aid. So majority
So
of $3
point,
million.
point to that one. Keep your cursor on chapter 70. So
Yeah.
we get a total of 3.575, and of the 3.575, 3 million is for schools.
Correct. And what's interesting is if you look at other towns, their percentage of chapter 70 to the total school budget is a lot higher than Southborough. I think that's one of the areas where the affluency of the town affects us. So I think we have what, a $35 million school budget? That seem right, Kathy?
That's a little high because you're picking up Algonquin, which of course is a separate town as far as.
Correct, correct. Yeah.
So K through 8 is, 20.
But other towns might have a $20 million budget and might get $20 million from chapter 70.
So there's a wealth factor that goes into this. So we wouldn't get, for example, if Northborough had exactly the same budget we had, the same number of kids in their K through 8, they're going to get more in that than we are.
Okay. And local receipts, which is mostly motor vehicle excise tax, some other fees. We just added this year local meals tax. And Kathy, did the selectmen vote on that to be in effect January 1st or?
They did.
Okay, so that'll go into effect. So we'll start seeing some of that income next year.
So now this one is also very important to understand. So I'm going to go back to the spreadsheet again. Because we're going to talk in a minute about a concept called free cash. Okay, so again, watch my cursor so you see this number right here, this number right here.
Next one up, certified free cash.
Well, I'm talking local receipts first.
Okay,
Okay, then I'll do free cash. Okay, so this is what we get. As Andrew said, the biggest generator of this is the local car excise tax that we all pay on our cars every year, the 2.5% of the depreciated value that we pay every year. So that's the majority of this, but there's many other big things: building permits, library fines, transfer station sticker fees, the interest on we've got $20 million in the bank at any one time, and we get interest income on it. That of course has gone down since the pandemic. It was pretty hefty number for a couple of years. So
Kathy,
that's all.
is that where police is for the roads, for the
Details. Yes.
Yeah. FYI, that's going to be really high this year.
So I got the spreadsheet today. I'm not going to share it tonight, but I will send it to everybody so they can see it. So there's just a lot of categories that go into this. There's also a local excise tax on the few motels that we have here. So just lots of things here. Oh, pilot payments, which you probably have heard a lot about. So those go into here. So the payments at St. Mark's and Faith School, any other not-for-profits make, they go into this number. So the reason this is important is the actual amount that we receive is much higher than what is put into the budget. And this is done on purpose. The actual amount for fiscal year 21 is about $1.1 million more than this. So it's about 4.8. And that's the way it is every year. That is what generates the surplus in our budget when everything is closed out for the most part. And that surplus is called free cash. So we don't give it back to the taxpayers, we keep it. And that's what we start the next fiscal year with. So for example, fiscal year 22 that we just finished doing the budget for, we had free cash from the previous year that we started off the year with of about $1.4 million. We will know the number for the budget year we're going to work on soon. I think we'll know it, I hope, next week. So we'll know what our starting point is. But I already know that $1.1 million is coming from local receipts. The rest of it comes from miscellaneous stuff. Every once in a while, most people spend their budgets. It's typical, as I'm sure you guys see in your jobs. When you have a budget at the end of the year, people tend to spend what they haven't spent, right? They'll look at what's left as far as surpluses go, and they spend it. Very few people go over their budget. So most people stick to it pretty well, but there's very few departments that actually turn back money to the town, but a few will. So there will be some excess money coming back from budgets unspent. That will be part of it. So we kind of wait anxiously on this number because you want this number to be a pretty big. So the previous year, it was a lot bigger, and that actually hurt us in fiscal year 22. That was one of the deficits we started off the year with, because you start here and then you go down by $500,000 to begin with. So that's not good. So we are going to talk soon in advisory about maybe suggesting that we try to stabilize certain expenses in certain line items like this one. So this doesn't bounce up and down like this, because this hurts us too. When this bounces, it puts us in a deficit. The year it goes down, the year it goes up, we look really good. So rather than have that happen, if it were more stable, then that would not happen. So we're going to talk about using the equivalent of the state rainy day fund. We've got only $600,000 in our town rainy day fund, and we call it stabilization. That's one of the words we said we need to understand. It's not very big compared to other towns. We have a philosophy, or have had a philosophy historically in advisory, that we don't want that number to be big. We want the money to stay in the taxpayers' hands, because we believe that they can use it better than the town can. So when the town needs more money, then they'll pay it. But until then, it stays in their pockets. So we're going to bring this one back up, see what people think at this point. We've actually got a white paper that a former advisory member wrote that we're going to circulate, so you can read kind of where our philosophy came from. But it may be changing. I am coming around to maybe trying to increase this. We've got a lot of excess money flowing in from the various COVID bills. The most recent one gave Southpro a ton of money. So we'd be able to fund it if with that money. So we've got a mechanism this year, which we may not have again, because we don't have a lot of excess cash at the end of the year, to fund a true stabilization fund that had a lot of money in it that we could use to stabilize certain line items. So much more of that later, but I did want to introduce the concept of certified free cash and make sure you understood where most of it comes from. Okay. All right, Andrew.
Okay. All right, and so this is an important one. So this is kind of the state average of taxes and where Southborough gets the majority of their pieces. This is what I was talking about, the state aid, and we'll see that Chapter 70 funds being a lot lower than on average. Also local receipts being a lot lower, just due to the nature. A lot of those local receipts come from commercial and other towns. So we don't just have a big commercial piece, but 82% of it goes through the tax levy. Here's another good little joke. This is kind of how you develop a working budget. Selectmen send a budget message. We get the different periods of fixed costs and other pieces from debt, retirement, et cetera, health insurance. And so a bunch of these pieces, especially on the expenses side, we'll touch on later. Health insurance, OPEB, our retirement, utilities is another one. So we try to dig into those ones in detail in kind of separate meetings. Then our department heads budgets, which we'll review with the department heads, at least the major ones. Capital needs, we have the capital planning committee, which will review all the different pieces in the long-term 10-year capital plan and provide a plan to us and to the selectmen, which we can review. And then we have our cherry sheet pieces and other off-budget items.
And we're going to explain cherry sheet and overlay in just a second. A lot of the terms with, towns that are, New England town meeting type formats have a lot of words that have carried over from England, and they don't always make sense, like warrant articles and overlay. So they are what they are. You just have to kind of memorize what the words mean, but they're not intuitive a lot of times.
So this isn't always how our meetings work, but this is kind of the general flow of how the budgets get reviewed. Sometimes it's a little bit iterative where when we get the budget, we'll go back and work on it with the selectmen and with Mark, Purple Town Administrator, et cetera. But in the end, the Finance Committee presents the budget to town meeting. And so we write a, little bit of a letter that they put at the beginning of the warrant and, kind of our opinion and how the year went and what the thoughts process are. And then obviously we have the town meeting presentation.
We write a report that we distribute at town meeting, a written report. We're required to do that. So we do that toward the end of this process to basically kind of summarize the year. So we give that out. We put it on the blog so that hopefully people can read it ahead of time. So that's one thing we do too. And then we make a presentation at town meeting, and we're there we sit at the front along with the Board of Selectmen, sit side by side, and then we show the votes on the screen of each warrant article. And we give the town meeting participants a chance to say, why did you vote the way you did? If you supported it unanimously, why? If you've got a split vote, what was the minority opinion? Why did they not vote? So we give people a chance to ask us why we are making the recommendation that we are.
Yep, and this is just basically talking about whether the budget's balanced or not and what you can do to balance it. We talked about Prop 2.5 override or use available funds, free cash stabilization, et cetera, to make sure it balances. But we always want to go to town meeting with a balanced budget. And Kathy, I can't ever remember us not.
No, because you have to.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean we can't incur debt to finance capital and things like that, but the operations should be balanced.
And then we present the budget to town meeting. It's just some best practices. And Kathy, you're gonna cover on, no, I was gonna do reserves for cash flow, right? Okay. So reserves and cash flow. So we have the reserve fund that the advisory and finance committee oversees. That's 190,000 that Kathy talked about. We have our stabilization fund, which is $600,000. And then we have the free cash that Kathy talked about, that we roll over every year, whatever's left over from the local receipts.
Our stabilization fund used to have over $3 million in it a few years ago. And then that's when advisory went to town meeting and said, we want this to be reduced to about $600,000, or actually about $500,000, because we do think we should have some money there, but not very much. Board of Selectmen disagreed vehemently with that, but the advisory viewpoint prevailed. So we basically took down the stabilization. So the tax rate the taxes went negative that year as far as increase goes. So it was a big windfall as far as taxes go for the 1 year. And we basically have kept it pretty much the same ever since. And it grows, the interest that it earns grows. So we just haven't added anything to it. So we've got very little in our equivalent of the state rainy day fund.
Yep. And an important thing here about the free cash is that it needs to be certified. So it usually takes what, till October, November or so, Kathy, for it to be certified. So that's why it's not in the current budget.
Yep.
So it just rolls into the next year's budget. And this kind of, Kathy went over the basic pieces of how you generate free cash. Again, the surplus revenue, free cash, and this is our town's free cash calculation. I won't go into it too much of details.
So there's details that go into it, but long story short, it's still mostly from the actual collection of local receipts versus what was budgeted. And then in the very end, if you can put your cursor down, Andrew, to that $1.4 million.
Yep, that's the number we had in our spreadsheet.
Yep, so that's how it comes out. So this is the town accountant that does this. She submits this. So you can see she submitted last year on 9/11. So I'm expecting to have this next week. So I'm hoping we'll know what our so that's our starting point as far as fiscal year 23 is understanding what the free cash is. So this is certified, it's in the bank, but we can't use it until it's certified. And then we can appropriate it for the next fiscal year.
And this is just a continuation of kind of the retained earnings calculation for the enterprise fund, which is the water fund.
Okay, so what he means by that is the water department is totally separate from the town. It's a thing called an enterprise fund. It's got its own P&L, it's got its own balance sheet. It basically is self-supporting, so it doesn't use any of the real estate taxes collected to support itself. It uses the funds from the water bills. So it's an entirely separate department that is self-sustaining on its own. It has its own free cash, which it does call retained earnings. So there's a different accounting term here, but it's on its own. DPW manager, Karen, our department head, Karen Galligan, manages that process too. So we set up the enterprise fund 2 years ago.
And then Kathy's going to review setting of the tax rate.
So I'm not going to get into too much detail here. This is what Paul Sabelli submits to the state once he determines all of the input that goes into here. So he fills out the spreadsheet, submits to the state. They basically audit it, look at it, and come back and say yay or nay, we agree with it. He's been around a long time, so they normally agree with it. But this is what he's doing as we speak. So this will be submitted soon. He'll come in from the Board of Selectmen and go over this. So this is what's going to finalize the tax rate. So last year's tax rate ended up being 1621. This year we think it's going to be 1626 or something thereabouts. Again, there's a few things that happen after town meeting that could adjust us a little bit either way. So he's in the process of finalizing that. Let's see if I can get to the number. Andrew, I can't see this number that's at the very bottom.
Which one?
The one that's below 98, 668, 800. Can everybody else?
27519977779.
Is it just me? I've got the, let's see if I can get rid of this. There you go, it's gone. Okay, so see the 2 million on the very bottom on the total line, that's $2,751,000,000. That was the total value of all Southpro property on January 1st, 2020. So he is in the process of adjusting that number for 1/1/21. And my guess is it's going to be much higher, significantly higher, because of the increase in values that we've seen throughout the country, and certainly Massachusetts and also in Southborough. So it will be interesting to see what that is. And again, that's not going to tell you anything about your taxes, because that will determine the tax rate, but you still got to multiply the tax rate times your value to get to your taxes. So that's just one half of the equation.
Yep. And one topic that comes up quite frequently is the fact that we have a similar or identical residential to commercial and industrial tax rate. So a lot of towns have a separate one. Some people are for it, some people are against it, but it's always something that comes up in analysis.
It's called a single tax rate. And every year there is a lovely person, Carl Geyer in Southborough, that goes to this meeting with the Board of Selectmen where Paul Sabelli comes, presents all this, and he asks that's where the Board of Selectmen vote to either retain the single tax rate or to do a split tax rate. And by splitting, they are going to make the commercial and industrial higher than the residential. So they're trying to push more of the tax burden to commercial and industrial. There has been very little support. It's definitely a minority position to do that in Southborough. I don't see anybody in the near future wanting to do that. That would be on, I don't think the Board of Selectmen is going to support it again. There may be one person that I think would like it, but he's one of 5. So I don't think that they're going to vote for it this year. So we should continue to expect a single tax rate where all 4 types of property are assessed at the same tax rate. I have never understood the philosophy around the split tax rate. The companies don't use the services that our town provides, which makes up the vast majority of the budget. They don't use the school system. They don't use, they don't use police and fire very often either. They use the roads to get to work and stuff, but they're not the service users that residents are. So I've never understood the philosophy of making the businesses pay more than residents, but there are some people that are adamantly for this. if you take a look at it, you can't, there's no study that is credible that shows there's a benefit to a town of a split tax rate. That is, you have, greater prosperity, you raise more money. So anyway, I don't think we're going to go there. Every year, the selectmen don't vote for it. And I don't think the group right now that we've got in place is going to vote for it either. But something to keep in mind, Boston's got a split tax rate. So there are split tax rates around.
Again, we'll send these out, but there's just more and more
Yeah,
pieces in here.
I'm trying not to have you guys just glaze over here. So it's all interesting though. Okay.
Yep. All right. I think that's it. That's the end of it.
So we got done faster than I thought we were. It's only 9:05, so it's pretty good. Okay, so anybody have any comment about anything you want to talk about? You want to have a chance to look at this on your own and ask questions as the topics come up at other meetings. It's kind of your preference as far as what you want to do with this. We're going to get it all to you. Happy to talk to it offline. As Jim said, we can certainly have a one-on-one conversation about anything you want to go into more detail and understand better.
Kathy, it's Marcy. I thought it was so helpful. Thank you both. I look forward to seeing the copy of it and trying to digest it a little more. I might have more questions then.
So
I just-
Marcy, Andrew and I and Tim, we didn't have the luxury of somebody doing this for us because, we never had a committee where so many people joined at one time. So we picked it up as time went on. And I can tell you, Andrew Pfaff and Tim picked it up really fast. I was pretty slow. It took me a while to truly get it all. So we thought this might help jumpstart your understanding of at least the big picture of how it works.
And I just sent it out, so you should have that in your inbox. And Claire has her hand raised. Kathy, if you want to go ahead, Claire.
Thanks, Andrew. This is just my experience from when I was on the advisory committee starting way back when in the 1990s. My question was, as a new member, where is the book that I can read all of this stuff in? Because that's how I kind of try to learn stuff. And a couple of the members said, don't worry about it. You'll pick it up as you go along. As a matter of fact, there are some excellent resources. And Kathy and Andrew, I would be very glad to put together my list of resources that I have used. I'll send it to you guys. You can check them out and you can send them out to the new people. It just has some really, it's nothing that I wrote. It's all just really good, either state resources or, and if nothing else, you can always go back to the old, for those of us who have been around for a while, the old Donna McDaniel description of town meeting. Kathy, you might remember that.
I don't. So what was it? Tell us.
Oh, Donna McDaniel, you remember her, right?
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
well, she gave a presentation that's actually on Sam video, which was done from the auditorium at Trotter School, talking about the whole process of town meeting and how one of the things that you referenced tonight was the terminology that is kind of like weird and where it came from. And she went through all of that. It was really very interesting. It's probably about 45 minutes.
Okay, so if you could do that, Claire, that would be great.
Okay, will do.
But we're going to give everybody the PowerPoint. So they've got that, and we've got some other documents to go with it. So there's a lot there. But I still think this will jumpstart what everybody needs to know.
And Kathy, Tom had his hand raised too.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. Go ahead, Tom.
Still can't hear you. Do you want to try switching to your phone? So if you go to the,
You can try the chat, Tom, and see if we can see your chat.
yep. But try, if you go to the mute and hit the arrow, you might just want to select a different microphone. That's usually what mine is an issue, or select switch to phone audio. And a little, that's right. All right. Tom said it's okay, sorry.
All right, so Tom, if you want to email me your whatever your comment question was, I'll make sure we answer it. Okay, so we're going to move on for the moment. We're almost done, so we're going to be done by 10 o'clock easily. All right, so let me do my chair update real quick. There's not a whole lot here. But again, keep November 1st on your calendar. It's a Monday night. Right now, there's still a plan to have a special town meeting that will include the following, if it's held. The main thing is the downtown initiative zoning bylaw change, which has been discussed for 2 years, Claire, now. So it's in the, we think it's in the.
At least.
Claire's been very involved in it through her work on the Economic Development Committee, EDC. Planning Board is going to have hearings next week. We're waiting to see whether they're going to support it or not. I think there may still be a few changes being made to it, but that's the main purpose of this special town meeting, is this bylaw change. We will go through it soon, because we've got to decide whether we're going to support it or not. Most people on this committee are new, so we will go back through it again as far as whether we are going to support it as a committee. The advisory bylaw changes we described earlier would be on it if we have the meeting. There is going to be a IT position added to the salary administration plan if we have the special town meeting, which is going to allow a second person to be hired to support Jason. This person is going to be a very strong second person, which advisory, especially Mr. Martell, highly encouraged to happen because of all the things going on in the world today that we've got to watch out for. So they're going to add this position officially to the SAP for the second person. There may be an increase in the Board of Health budget, and I won't get in that tonight. I'm going to see if it's going to happen first, but there is quite a story behind that. That's not a normal thing to happen at a special meeting, but they may request an increase to their budget. And that's all we know so far that would be on the special town meeting. If the downtown initiative gets pulled or possibly not supported by the planning board, there may not be a special town meeting, because the other things are not going to cause people to come out, I don't think, and want to risk, COVID, whatever. So I don't think we'll have a special town meeting if the downtown initiative is not going to go forward as a warrant article. So we'll know soon. We'll probably know a lot more next week.
Are they planning on giving us a chance to have some back and forth with them?
By them, you're talking planning board, board of selectmen, or EDC?
Mainly EDC, the sponsors.
We haven't talked about it, Tim, because they're still trying to get, the planning board hearing. So the planning board hearing is going to be next Monday. So we definitely should tune into that. So if you've got a chance to watch it, you should, because it will help you understand what's going on here. Marcy, my guess is you've got a pretty good handle on it. But if you haven't been following this, it's a pretty big deal, and there's definitely opposition to this. So it's not going to, pass unanimously at town meeting by any stretch of the imagination. I know Tim Martell's got a problem with some of it. So yes, I'm planning on making sure that we've got a chance to, again, understand, the final product that is going to be in the warrant article. But this is, time's running out.
I think, Kathy, it's technically sponsored by the Selectmen, isn't it?
Yes, this one is sponsored by Selectmen. That's a true statement. They think this meeting is going to be in the Tri-Tier gym, not the auditorium, because Board of Health says we're going to have to be 6 feet apart. We're going to wear a mask. But of course, the gym, may be uncomfortable for a lot of people. It doesn't have, you got benches and not seats to sit in. So to be determined if we're really going to have it. But if the downtown initiative gets pulled or not supported, my guess is we're not going to have it, because other things, we won't get a quorum for those other things, I don't think. No one's going to come out to add a vice chair to advisory or to reduce, from 9 to 7. I'm pretty sure it's just not that exciting. So we will see, but keep it on your calendar. It's Monday night so far. One of the things, I forget who may or may not have gone to this past town meeting, but one of the articles on the warrant for this past year was a new noise bylaw. It was a citizen sponsored noise bylaw. it failed. It was promoted by a town resident named Peter Lapine. It failed, but it didn't fail because we don't necessarily think we don't need a noise bylaw. It was just what he was proposing seemed to need a lot of work on it. The police chief didn't support it. He had a lot of problems with it, but he thinks we need a noise bylaw. So the Board of Selectmen have now seated a committee that is going to propose a noise bylaw. There's 7 people on it, including a retired policeman who used to be on the Public Safety Building Committee. So I think that's a really good choice because he understands the police perspective. That will not be ready for November 1st. That's a fact. So the earliest that can be ready is for the regular town meeting next spring. But they have seated the committee, so they should be off to the races as far as their work sometime soon. So that's coming. This last town meeting, there was another citizen petition to add a truck exclusion to Flag Road. I think Tim lives over in that area. Flag Road, as you know, is a beautiful road, very narrow though, and really can't take a lot of traffic. So one of the residents did a citizens petition to ask the town to go through the process of getting a truck exclusion of Flag Road. All the petition could do was make a request to the Board of Selectmen to do it. There was no ability for the petitioner to ask for a vote to require it. So it was just basically a recommendation. It passed. The Board of Selectmen have taken it under advisement. They have hired someone to do a full-blown study for all of the roads in Southborough because they feel like it's going to be a problem if they just focus on Flag Road. Problem is Main Street's got a truck exclusion already. So where do you dump the traffic if you take it off Flag Road? So they have basically engaged a traffic study firm to take a look at all the roads in Southborough and come back with a recommendation as to where we should have truck exclusions. So we kind of make a holistic recommendation or decision and not one that causes more problems than it solves. Andrew, are you asking for a truck exclusion on Oak Hill?
I'd love one. It's not going to happen, but
All right. I mean, my road,
the problem with the bylaw is the only person that can grant a truck exclusion is Mass DOT. So not in the Selectmen's or DPW's, purview.
Right.
So,
but you've got you've got to apply for it if you want one though. So you've got to take the first step. I mean, my road, Pine Hill, we have asked for one in the past. We didn't get it. So we've got the same problem with trucks zipping through there all day long. It's a real cut through. So anyway, I think they've made a good decision here to look at this holistically and try to make a good decision that is the best overall decision and not one for just one street. So that's in process. Let's see. They've also, the Selectmen.
I'm sorry, can we circle back just to the EDC
Yes.
downtown? I'm deeply concerned about the timing. We're going to be well into our budget reviews, I think. And if advisory is going to be given time to truly understand how this has changed from the last time we've seen it, and some people on the board haven't even seen it, and if there's going to be an expectation that we might want changes to this, they might have to go back to their consultant. I feel like given the current time frame that this is going to try to become a rush job, and I don't even know when they have to. I mean, they need to do what, a 30-day notice for a town meeting, or is it 45?
I don't remember.
I think it's at least 30 days, which means that's pretty much 2 weeks from now.
Well, he's about ready. I mean, I've got to get him the advisory one tomorrow. So they're about ready to go to the printer.
But here's my question, and this is something for the selectmen to decide, of course, but are they, if there's one if there's one warrant article that's truly driving the special town meeting and advisory turns out to be against it, do they really want to hold this town meeting? I'm a little bit surprised that we haven't been involved in this by these groups, by planning, by the selectmen, and I certainly hope that there isn't an expectation that we're just going to roll over and rubber stamp it.
Which we won't. So if, once we know what happens on Monday, I can certainly schedule the appropriate people to come before us on the 29th, which is our next meeting.
I think that that's a good start, but I think we have to be fair to all the members of this board. You know, I don't think one meeting is going to get it done. I just want to make certain that there's fair warning.
Okay.
Right, I think the selectmen and planning and whoever else is involved needs to understand that advisory needs time to review the articles that are put before it for a town meeting.
All right, I will make sure I make that point with Mr. Purple. Sam Stivers is in our audience, so he's listening, as always. Okay. So I'm going to go on. Tim, are you ready for me to go on?
I am ready. Please continue.
I will. Okay, so one of the things that the selectmen have done recently is they've hired a consultant to basically help the town make sure we take full advantage of any COVID funds that are available, especially the most recent bill that got passed, the ARPA bill, where there's a lot of money available to do lots of different things. So they've hired this person. I think she's about $100 an hour. Not sure what budget she's going to come out of. That I asked today, and the person I asked didn't know. But anyway, she's been hired. I think she used to work for a town. So she was a town, maybe ex-town administrator, but she worked for a town. So that's her background. But she's been hired to help do that piece of it, which we're also going to spend quite a bit of time on. So we expect fiscal year 21 to be closed out next week. The town accountant is going to make a presentation to the Board of Selectmen as far as the closeout. So we'll get the same information and know how things ended up, including free cash. So that's coming. We've got the ability to do Zoom meetings to next April. So the Board of Selectmen are not going to mandate either way. It's my understanding, once we get past this September deadline, that they where everybody had to do Zoom. So we've got the ability to do Zoom. They're not going to make you do in person if you want to do Zoom. That's what they might make you do Zoom, but if the in-person meetings are allowed, they're not going to make you do in person if you prefer to do Zoom. So I would like to get a flavor of what people prefer going forward as far as meetings. Whether you rather do Zoom if we think it's appropriate, or you rather do in person if it's allowed. So AP, I'm going to start with you because I see you first.
I would say for meetings, I think Zoom is easier. I think it would be nice if we could find some time to have a in-person meeting that was maybe a little bit more social. You know, to do something light topic-wise, but at least try to meet people in person at some time that was convenient, but maybe a real short meeting.
Okay. All right, Marcy.
I completely concur with Andrew. I appreciate the Zoom meeting option and hope that continues, but would love to meet everyone face to face.
Okay. Adam.
Yeah, I agree with the two previous comments of Andrew and Marcy. I'm comfortable meeting in person if we'd like to do that from time to time, but Zoom is certainly easier.
Well, we I think may have a majority pretty quick. Eric.
Same as all of the above.
Okay. Tom. So Tom, this is what I want you to do. Do a 1 if you want Zooms. Okay, put your finger up. I don't
You
see
might have
it.
fixed his audio, so why don't you try it, Tom?
I don't think so. No.
Not yet.
Okay, so 1 if you prefer Zoom. And you did a 1, right? 2 if you prefer in person.
1.
Okay, 1. Okay, Mr. Martell.
Zoom.
And I'm a Zoomer too. I just think this helps. Okay, so I know it helps Eric, Adam, Andrew P, Tom, and probably Tim. You all have young children, right? And some of you have really young children. Andrew Pfaff has a newborn, and we saw Eric's little cute daughter tonight. So we know you've got young children, so I know it helps with that. So we're going to do Zooms, and we will try to do an in-person at some point so we can actually see each other in person. But until then, we're going to do Zooms. All right, that was a easy decision. So one of the big things that is restarting as far as a big topic in Southborough is whether to close one of the schools, one of the K-8 schools. So we've got 4. You've got Trotter for the 6 through 8. You've got Neary, that's right now 4 and 5. You've got Woodward, that is 2 and 3. You've got Finn, that's pre-K, K, and 1. There is excess capacity in the K-8 system because those schools were built at a time where the population, remember Andrew's slide where population grew so much in the 90s? So that's when the schools were planned and built. So we've got a lot of excess room in the 4 schools. So there is a subcommittee of the Capital Planning Committee that is in the process of making a recommendation to the school committee as far as whether we believe that a school could be closed, can be closed. We went through this process 8 years ago in 2013. I was on that committee too, and we concluded you could close a school even back then, but you had no choice back then but to close Neary. You couldn't close Woodward because it was too new and there was still too much money that was owed to us by the state for its piece of the construction costs that we would lose if we closed Woodward early. That bond is almost paid off, so that issue's gone away. So we can now close Woodward if we think that is the better school to close. Neary is 50 years old. It's going to need a whole lot of work if we keep Neary open. So one way or another, Neary's got to be rehabbed if we're going to keep it as school. So that's a fact. So that's one of the biggest issues on the table. What's different about today and 8 years ago is that the town also has needs as far as space goes. 8 years ago, we didn't even consider what the town needed at all. So this time, the town does need some space. The senior center needs either to have some money spent on it or they need to move to a better place. And as you saw, that's why I mentioned that the senior population is expected to grow pretty big the next 10 to 15 years. So there's one. We are probably going to end up disposing of what we call the South Union Building on the south side of town. Right now it's got 2 small departments in it, recreation and youth and family services. So those 2 departments have to be moved someplace. So the thinking is that the school that gets closed would be then used for other town functions, departments, senior center, etc. So we don't know what the answer is. There's 3 people on the committee. It's Jason Malinowski, myself, and then a person from school committee, Couture Martin. So my guess is we'll finish our work in the next few months at the most, make a recommendation, and then a committee. And then if we agree that a school could be closed, and I think that's probably more likely than not, then the school committee will then vote as to whether they want to then close the school. Last time we said you could, but they voted not to. They didn't want to close the school. They thought it was too risky to close Neary, because if you had to reopen Neary, it would cost a fortune because you'd have to do all kinds of ADA stuff, etc. So they decided not to do it 8 years ago, but today the demographics are even stronger to support closing a school than they were back then. We've done demographic studies, 2 of them now, to basically try to assure ourselves that we think with a margin of error, that we've got plenty of room to close the school. So that's going to be one of the big issues that the town has to decide. Anything to do with schools gets very emotional in this town. There will be a lot of discussion of it. We will be involved in that. So that is to come. And of course, with me being on the committee, I can keep everybody posted as to what's going on, just like Andrew Pfaff can keep everybody posted as to what's going on in the parent committee, the capital planning committee. But anyway, that's going to be interesting to see what happens there as far as the schools go. We've got a great set of schools, but there's just a lot of room in them right now as far as excess capacity. All right. So schedule. So we're going to be on an every other week Wednesday schedule for now, unless something happens that makes us have a special meeting. So the next meeting would be 9/29. I'm sorry about my snafu last week. I've done this before. My office does not take off on Labor Day. I forget all about it every year. That's our September 15th is by far my biggest deadline. So we never take Labor Day off. And it wasn't until Andrew Pfaff said, "Are you going to post the meeting?" And I realized I didn't have Monday to count as my 48 hours. So that's my fault. I apologize. Probably will happen again. Okay. So anyway, so we should be on a roll now. Anything anybody wants to talk about between meetings, call Tim, Andrew, or I. We're happy to talk to you. As Jim said, we can talk one-on-one. It's not a quorum when two people talk. So if you got questions you want to talk about, substance, whatever, we're happy to do it, so that we can get everybody truly up to speed and you feel like you know what you need to know to make your decisions. Okay. All right, let's see if there's any public comment. I don't see any, so see none. Okay, anything else anybody wants to talk about before we adjourn for the night? Are you stunned? Are you got it all? You ready for your test? We didn't tell you you're going to have a test, did we? So we'll send the test out. It'll be open book.
What's the loser of the test have to buy the winner?
I don't know. We haven't figured that out.
Okay. Let's open books.
You get your pick of liaison assignments.
There you go. All the departments are good. You'll like being a liaison. You get to know people and realize, we got really good people that work for the town. Okay, so seeing nobody to comment, Andrew, you want to make a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Can someone second? That's not muted.
Second.
Was that Adam?
Second by Adam. Yep.
Okay, second by Adam, Claire. All right, roll call vote. AP,
Aye.
Marcy,
Aye.
Adam,
Aye.
Eric,
Aye.
and Tom. I just don't know if raising your hand.
Aye.
Okay.
Aye. We
Oh,
got one more.
okay. Aye. There you go. There you go. Tim, did Tim say aye?
Aye.
Perfect.
Sorry, I didn't hear you the first time. Cook is aye. So Claire, there you go, 7-0 to adjourn. So thank you everyone for hanging in here tonight, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Have a good night.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.